Hi, my name's Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. So I haven't found necessary to have a drink since January. When?
January 24th.
25th, 1981. And so I'm in my 46th year of sobriety thing. So step 6. Those of you, I know a lot of you guys, not everybody here, and but those of you who have been to my step series and know me know that whenever I do a step series, the only step I ever talk about is step 6 and 7. It may sound to you like I'm talking about step 1, but I don't talk about step 1. I'll say something about alcohol, but I'm really talking about step 6. No matter what step I'm on, I'm always on step 6 and 7. They're the only steps you ever need to know. I'm telling you, they're the only steps you ever need to know. I'm going to tell you a little bit about. I'm going to tell you what I've seen and what I know, and maybe you'll get what I'm saying. I wouldn't lie to you. The whole book boils down to the only thing that's worth anything in this whole thing is step 6 and 7. You think I'm full of shit, right? You have no fucking idea. We'll see where you are at 46 years. We'll see how you're doing. You know what step separates the men from the boys? The adults, the grown-ups, not the fucking children. Not the idiots. Not the guys that are never going to make it past 40 years or 30 years anyway. You know what step separates? It's not the first step. I've seen guys who have taken the first step drinking yet. I know they tell you that it's the 100%. The only step you need to do 100% is the first step. There's a lot of people. Let me tell you something. God doesn't stay sober for 10 years and 20 years and then drinks because he hasn't taken the first step. You believe that shit? You believe that, don't you? Let me tell you something. Bill Wilson wrote the big book when he had 3.5 years. I've had 3.5 years. So many people here have had 3.5 years. You learn a lot in 46 years. You see a lot in 46 years. Bill Wilson wrote about the 6th step when he had 3.5 years. He learned a lot in 12 or 13. I'll tell you how much he learned. 15 years later, when he wrote the 12 and 12, he said, this is the step that separates men from the boys. When he wrote the big book, he wrote one small paragraph. He said, say this prayer, you're done with the 6th step. 6 or 7 years after that, he wrote The Next Frontier. And he said, I got it all wrong. That's got to make you feel good when the co-founder of AA at like 20-something years, after reading all this stuff and memorizing it, he's got a gun in his mouth, you know what I mean? He's going nuts. And he says, I got it all wrong. You learn a few things when you have, that was in 1958 he wrote that, 59. You learn a few things after a few years. You know? You see things differently. You get what's called a change of perspective. I think he talked about it in the 12 and 12. He says the way we get a change of perspective is by repeated humiliations, the final crushing of our self-sufficiency. So listen, so here's the deal. I could be wrong. You know, here's the good part. You guys are going to get to test my theory out. I've already tested it out to my satisfaction. Now, I'm not saying I know everything about the 6th step. I'm sure I don't. I know I don't. But I know a few things. It's a little bit clearer now. Things are clearer now as you get older. But here's the good part. I'm just going to tell you what I found and what I know, and then you can test it out for yourself. You know, and if 40 years from now you're doing something like this, we'll see what you have to say. And maybe you'll say, you know, I heard this guy, Russell Spatz, he was so full of shit, he says, but I was wrong. Because things have changed for me. Because I experienced some stuff. You know, that's how we get a new perspective, by repeated humiliations, final crushing of our self-sufficiencies. The only thing that it means to have 40 years is I've had 40 years of humiliations and crushing of my self-sufficiency. And every time you get crushed, you'll learn a little bit more. So I'm going to read you a couple of things. I actually know these things by memory, but I mean, I want to read it from the book exactly the way it is. And 2 or 3 things, and they're sort of connected. Now, I'm not going to necessarily tell you how they're connected. That would be a waste of time. It really would be. I want you to try to figure it out for yourself. We have people here that have 40 years, who have 30, 20, 15, 10, one day. I'll just tell you a little bit about my life and what the 6th step means to me now. Now, what it means to me now at 77 years of age. I could try to dumb it down. If I could act, my brain is shot. I've got dementia all over the place. I can't remember anything. Some guy came up and he says, "You remember what we were talking about yesterday?" I said, "Are you serious?" Please. I remember what I said an hour ago. I said, so I can't even remember. I can remember certain snippets of what I was doing at like 1 year or 18 months. I don't even remember the time or when it happened and when things happened. Everything is an approximation for me. I remember certain things and certain people in my life and things that happened that I can share with you. So I can't be exact. I can just sort of like cover as much as I can cover. So maybe you'll see the 6th step the way I see the 6th step. The most important step. The only step. 6 and 7 is very important too. So I'm going to read you from step 6, from step 7, just some sentences and a paragraph. And I'm going to tell you they are really related to understand the 6th step. And then I'll let you figure it out. I'll tell you a few things about my life and what the 6th step means to me and what it's done for me. So let's start off with the big book, written by Bill Wilson when he had 3.5 years. By the way, you know what they call the 6th step? They call the 6th and 7th step old-timer steps. Did you know that? Why do you think they call them old-timer steps? Well, maybe it takes a long time to figure out what the hell they're talking about. I'll tell you what, there were mysteries to me. Okay, let me ask this. How do you do the 6th step? You guys have all done it. The big book, Bill Wilson told you how to do it. Okay, I'm going to tell you what he says. 3.5 years. Sobriety. This is before the LSD and I'm not putting Bill down. I love Bill Wilson. You know why? Because he's a flipping alcoholic. And he stayed sober, and when he fell and he had problems, he wrote it down in The Next Frontier. He had the guts to do that. Can you imagine being the founder of AA and in 1958, writing in the grapevine, an essay, or writing an essay, and in the essay as the founder saying, "I screwed up. I got it all wrong." Could you do that? I don't know whether I could do that. He did that because he was trying to talk to people about what had happened to him. In 20 years and what he had gone through and how he had gotten it all wrong. So here's what he said when he had 3.5 years. I don't know, 3.5, 4 years, something like that. It says, this is on page 76. If we can answer to our satisfaction that we did all these other steps to 5, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look to step 6. Okay, it's pretty easy. We look to step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? All the things we admitted in 3.5 years that we realized are objectionable. Let me tell you something. You got to be in here like 20 years to realize how fucked up you are. You don't have a clue at 3.5 years how fucked up you are. Every week, every year, every month, you say, "Oh man, I really am fucked up." Every story you hear from a guy with 10 years says, "Man, I fucking do that." You know what I mean? So how can you admit and have God to take all these things when you don't even know what the things are until you get sober? And you've been around for 10 years and 20 years, and all of a sudden the bank account's taken because the IRS comes in and takes all your money. And then you realize, man, I am one greedy son of a bitch. Why do they want my money? They don't want your money. They want their money. Oh, you look at it differently. If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized the willingness as being indispensable. We are now ready to let God remove remove from us everything which we admitted are objectionable. So I take it you guys have already figured this one out. You've done it already. What are we even talking about? You know step 6. Can he now take all of them? Every one. The whoring part. The trying to get laid, that kind of, the stuff that was pretty much in our mind, the running around doing all that stuff, seeking money, prestige, romance. You ready for that to be taken away from you? You ready to chop that sucker off? You ready, guys? You ready? Oh, they just told you have to stop drinking. No. You gotta get rid of the penis. You ready? You ready for that, guys? You don't look at any of these gals in the room, do you? Gals, you don't look at the guys. You don't walk in the room and look at the girls, You don't do that, do you? Because God is a central fact of your life, and you're going to do everything to remove that from you. You guys have all done the 6th step. It's clear. Are we not? Wait, it gets better. Are we now ready to have God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take all of them? Every one. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us to be willing. I don't even know why I'm talking this stuff to you guys. You've clearly done it. When we are ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do thy bidding. Amen. Amen. I did that at 18 months. I said that, and I did that at 18 months. And I believe I was sincere. And then you know what it says? We have then completed step 6.
Boom. Have a good night, folks.
Okay, that's it. Now you can take that and you go home and say, I've completed, I'm done, everything's great. I'm now one of the men, I'm not one of the boys, I'm not one of the thumb-sucking crybabies. Everything's okay with me, I'm cured and everything like that. Or you can hear the rest of the story. Would you like to hear the rest of the story? Let me continue. Because I thought I was done, but God had other plans. So that's, they say that's step 6. So now here's step 6 in the 12 and 12. This is 13 years, 13 years later. This is Bill Wilson on step 6, okay? This is the step. It says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That hasn't changed. And this is what he says. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. Whatever that means, but it means something, right? It means something. It means somehow there's a separation. And the women from the girls. There's a separation. You're somehow separated out. Now, sometimes I say to myself what I believe, and I believe this is the truth. I believe, what I'm telling you is I believe this is the truth. That doesn't mean it is the truth, or you even have to believe what I'm saying. I believe this is the step that separates the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous from the Fellowship of the Spirit. This is the step that separates the people that don't want to hear about God because it's uncomfortable. These are the people that just want to get on with their lives, get married, have kids, have money, have cars, and everything like that from people that want to know the Lord and want to know God better. These are the steps that separate the guys who snicker and stand out in the parking lot, looking at the women or thinking about their lives, who go out from here and just go out and try to get everything in the world they want to get from the people that really want to know God better. I think this is the step this is a step they talk about in the last page where it says, but we won't know you. We don't know that. Only God knows that. but your real reliance has to be on him. This is the step that it says God either is or he isn't. What's your decision going to be? There are no middle of the road solution. Burn the idea into every outlook. It says all that, and it says he will show you how to create the fellowship you crave, and you crave godly fellowship, a fellowship where the people are talking about God. Not that, and then I drank, because you're over the drinking thing. You want to know the God thing. This is the step where it says, see that your relationship with God is right, and great events will come to pass for you in the countless. So it's not just not drinking, because you could be not drinking and still a basket case. You know? You'll meet some of us, not all of us, in the fellowship of the Spirit, which is different than the fellowship of AA. The fellowship of AA, the only requirement is the desire to stop drinking. It doesn't even have to be an honest one. Fellowship of the Spirit is a different thing. So this is what step 6 says after 15 years. This is the step that separates the men from the boys, so declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. By the way, this wasn't even Bill Wilson. He put that in there. This is something a clergyman. This is something Father Ed Dowling told him. This is something somebody learned from somebody in the clergy. He goes on to explain, he meaning the clergyman. This isn't even Bill Wilson. This is a clergyman talking to Bill Wilson as to what this step really means. He goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on every one of his faults, by around 15 years, you pretty much know how really messed up you are, but you probably have more to learn, without any reservations, has indeed come a long way spiritually, and is therefore entitled to call a man who is, now here's the definition of step 6. And this is something that I'm going to go back to. You can try to put this together. This is how you know you're on step 6. If you are sincerely, no bullshit, sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of your Creator, of God. You're trying to grow in the image of God. If you don't know what God looks like, you can't do it. If you don't know what God looks like, you can't do it. If God is just like a vague thing to you, well, he's just out there somewhere, then you're playing God. He's not only the God of your understanding, he's the God you like. He says, yeah, go ahead and get that gal. He says, yeah, go ahead and grab the money. You're playing God. You know, it's got to be, you've got to have some idea of who you're following, who you want to be like. And whoever that God is, he probably incorporates all the steps and all the principles and everything like that. You know, that's the deal. I don't know. That's what he said at 15 years. When you got to 1959, he said a few different things. That's when he said, I got it all wrong. He said, I've noticed there are some people that are getting this thing right. He says, but most of the old timers I know, they passed the booze test, but they're still emotionally immature. They're not even men yet, including me. He says, perhaps these guys will be the spearhead for the next major development in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what he said. This is what Bill Wilson says, if you read that. This is after like 20-something years, 22 years or 20 years, something like that. So maybe you'll understand what I'm saying, because I'm in my 46th year. Not that I'm perfect, right? I'm so far from perfect. I'm so screwed up. I'm so far from this deal. You know how I know I'm far from this deal? Because I know who my God is. Because the one thing that has happened to me in the last 46 years is I know who God is. Who my God, the God of my understanding, who he is. And when you know who God is, you know how screwed up you are. You know how much you fall short. Luckily, the God of my understanding takes that into account, and he loves me anyway. So, I mean, I don't have to feel ashamed. You know, I know I'm a screw up. You know, that's okay. But I'm just trying to move forward. So now here's another thing that I'm going to link. Now, let me talk to you about step 7 for a second, because it has something to do with step 6. This is what step 7 says. Since this step 7 so specifically concerns itself with humility, we should pause here to consider what humility is and what the practice of it can mean. The attainment of greater humility, whatever that is the foundation principle of each of A's 12 steps. For without some degree of humility, no alcohol can stay sober at all. Unless you have some degree of humility, for instance, here's a degree of humility. The ability to actually go to an AA meeting, even if you're sober 5, 10, 15 years or 3 months, the ability to go there. So everybody in here has some humility. Otherwise, you'd be out there saying, screw this shit. I don't want to hear this guy. The fact that you're actually listening to me is some degree of humility. So everybody in here has some degree of humility. Even if you don't like me, you say, I hate this guy. This guy's so full of shit, so full of himself. The fact that you sit there and listen to me, some people can't. They just walk out the door. Say, I didn't come here for this shit. You know what I mean? But the fact that it's alcoholics, you can actually sit here and listen to this bullshit. Saying, I don't know, maybe there's something there, there's some degree of humility. So it says, for without some degree of humility, no alcohol can stay sober at all. Nearly all AAs have found, too, that unless they develop much more of this precious quality that may be required for sobriety, they still haven't much chance of becoming truly happy. So the question is, would you like to be happy? Would you like to be rocketed in the fourth dimension of existence? Would you like to know heaven? Would you like to know peace? That's the question. Without it, they cannot live to much useful purpose, or in adversity, be able to summon the faith that can meet any emergency. And one of the things it says here is that humility is the basis of all the steps. So it's the basis of the sixth step. So now here's a couple more quotes. Don't have to read it from the big book. Here's a quote by Bill Wilson. The Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease, that I got to keep talking about him and telling other people. The Lord, we all know who that is, we know what he is, he says the Lord, okay? He's not unashamed, has been so wonderful to me. This is like a month, 6 months sober, that I have to keep talking about him and telling other people. That takes some humility to be able to say that. Most people don't have that ability. I certainly didn't maybe have that ability the first 5 years or 10 years, And here's the next thing he said. This is like 2 months later. I needed him, I wanted him, and he came. He said that too. A few months later, he said this. But soon, worldly clamors blocked out his presence. And so it has been ever since. This is Bill Wilson. Soon worldly clamors during the first... This is Bill Wilson talking about himself when he wrote the big book in 3.5 years. He needed God, he wanted God, and God came. He was going to tell everybody about it and everything, but soon worldly clamors blocked out his presence. So if that's what happened to Bill Wilson, and this is our basic text, isn't that what happens to us? How are you going to prevent when you get sober and you have 5 years and 10 years and you get the car and you get the wife and you get to this and you get to that? How are you going to stop it from happening to you? Now I'll give you the answer. By the way, this is probably the only answer I'll give you. I'll tell you how you stop worldly clamors from blocking out his presence. Would anybody like to know that? You need to make sure his presence is bigger than the clamors. This is PhD shit I'm giving you. We can go home right now and you can be saying, well, what the hell is that all about? You need to make sure that his presence is 1,000 times bigger in your life, such a central fact that it blocks out cancer, that it blocks out lust, that it blocks out everything but him. So how do you do that shit? That's what you guys are going to be struggling with for a while. So here's the deal with me. Here's what my deal is, okay? Because I think it's important to talk about yourself. So I'm a whore. I don't mind admitting that. You know, I'm a Bible guy. It says, by the God of my understanding says, when you're weak, I'm strong. My power is made perfect in your weakness. You know, when you're weak, I believe that because it's been proven all the time. When I get slam dunk and I get killed and I get crushed, I'm asking people for help. I'm hanging into meetings. I get real humble. I pray to God and everything like that. As soon as I get, 10 grand or something like that, or people are nice to me and everything like that, all of a sudden I'm a world whore. I start looking at the world and how good I'm doing and everything like that. I am at my best spiritually when I'm at my worst in the world.
Wow.
My best spiritually when I'm at my worst in the world. And all I do my entire life is look to make sure I do whatever I have to do to avoid being bad in the world, you know what I mean, in every possible way. And I lie to myself. I tell myself things that are untrue. So my whole life, between the ages, 14, maybe before that, but I don't remember, 14, when I discovered Playboy magazine, until 31 years of age, when I stopped drinking, was trying to get laid. Yeah, I know you're laughing because you don't know what it's like. But let me tell you something. When I was at work, the only thing I was thinking about at work is getting off of work and going to the bar at 4:30 and getting drunk and seeing whether I could find her. You understand what I'm saying? My life was about sex, romance, cars, because you need a nice car in order to get laid. You understand? Yeah, you think it's a joke. I'm telling you. You need a Rolex. You need to get a Rolex. You need to buy shit and get shit and have shit. You need to get buff. You need to go to the gym. You need to have a big house. You need to have a mansion. You need to have this in order to get laid. Listen, I know this doesn't apply to you. I get that. But there may be an alcoholic here who says, I identify with that shit. You know what I mean? I don't know how women are. But I think I have a feeling that I would never talk for a woman, you know what I mean? I'm married. I've never been able to talk at all. As a matter of fact, the only time I talk, the reason I talk a lot is because I can't talk in my own home. You know what I mean? That's the only reason I talk. So here's the deal. All my life, I'm looking for money, property, prestige, and romance. Same thing as Bill Wilson when he wrote The Next Frontier. My whole life is dependent on. He said I was too dependent. This is what he says at like 20-something years. He says I was too dependent on people, places, things, and on Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when you get sober and everybody's looking up to you and you're doing well and you get the cars and you get the stuff, things are looking for you, you are so deeply involved in the world. So here's what happened. For 31 years, I'm looking for money, property, and prestige, and I come into AA, and I was a good AAer. I sponsored people. Okay, I went to 3 meetings a day when I first went. I'm talking about when I was 3 years, 4 years, 5 years sober. I went to a morning, on the way to work, I went to a morning meeting. 12 o'clock, I went to a lunch meeting. 5:30, as I was driving home, I went to the Sunset Group. And then my sponsor would pick me up at 8:30 at night. I wasn't unusual for me to go to 4 meetings. They used to say 90 and 90. That was a joke to me. I went to all the stuff. I did all the steps. I was a good AA. And you know something? I think the truth is I was sincere. I believe I was sincere. And so I'm looking for money, property, prestige, sex, romance for the first 31 years. And because as one of the results of that and my alcoholism is I drank myself into a sloppy wreck. I drank myself into a sloppy wreck and I hurt a lot of people. And it got so bad that I got on my knees and said, God help me. And a couple of weeks later, I was in Alcoholics Anonymous and I picked up a white chip. That's humility. I've been sort of fighting to get back to that was when I was at my best. And then it all started falling apart. Okay, you ready for that? You with me? That's what happened. And then after I got sober, for the next 10 or 15 years, I continued to look for the same thing. while going to Alcoholics Anonymous. Then for the next 10 or 15 years, maybe 20 years, I'm not even sure of the time, I continued to look for the same thing. I'm sitting in an AA meeting. You've heard this story before. I'll say it again. I'm 3 months sober. I'm sober now. I'm humble, sober, and all that stuff. I say to my sponsor, look at that blonde in the front row. To me, I go right back to the Alibi Lounge, looking for the broads, looking for the gals, looking for what you look like and everything like that in the front row, except I'm not drinking beer, I'm drinking coffee. And I'm hanging out with the same freaking people. Everybody who was in the bar with me, with their same thoughts and the same attitude, I'm with the same group of people. Doing the same shit I was doing in the Alibi Lounge, but drinking coffee and thinking myself spiritual. So I do. You know a different AA than I know it. But I know myself. And then for the next 10 years, I'm doing this. I have God over here for like 1 hour a day, maybe 2 hours a day, maybe if I'm looking 3 hours a day or some God here, assuming while I'm even in the meeting, I'm thinking about the money, I'm thinking about the bank account, I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about the blonde in the front row, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm still a world whore. I mean, how do you get away from it? How do you get away from worrying about whether you're going to pay the mortgage? How do you get away from worrying about how you're going to handle it? How do you get away from, and you got all that shit going on. You're waking up, you're anxious. The whole world is killing you because you're scared shitless. Sometimes you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 years sober, 10 years sober, 9 years, what the hell's going on? Because you talk about God, you do the steps, you do all this stuff, but the bottom line is you're still scared. You're still anxious. What are you anxious about? You're anxious about things. You're not anxious about God. You're not anxious about the 6 step. You're anxious about the car. You're anxious about the cell phone. You're anxious about the job. You're anxious about the girl. You're anxious about romance. You're anxious about whether you have a guy, whether you have a girl. You're anxious about, in other words, the world, the real dis-ease that centers in my mind, not my body, is just as strong as when I was drinking. The only difference is I'm going to enough AA meetings so that for an hour or 2 or 3 hours away a day and talking to people, I get distracted from the things of this world. But as soon as I leave the meeting, a half an hour, it's got like a half-life of a half an hour, I'm back to thinking about, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen this? And all of a sudden, I'm experiencing the loneliness. I'm experiencing the self-pity. I'm experiencing all this, except I have tools now. What are the tools for? The tools are stuff I use so I don't blow my fucking brains out. And every once in a while I go to a meeting and say, I really needed this meeting. And I really did need the meeting because, I'm as sick as I was before I came to AA, doing the same thing and having the same thoughts. So now what are you going to do, big shot? When you realize down the road at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years that AA is not working for you. And you're 20 years sober and you're still worried again about the money. You're still worried again about the sex. You're still looking at the gals. You're still looking at the porn. You're still doing all that sort of stuff. And God is the last thing on your mind. Now what do you do, big shot? And you go to the meetings and you don't hear anything about what I'm talking about. You hear don't drink and go to meetings. And you're not drinking and going to meetings. And you're still anxious and scared. Well, I got news for you. There's a step that separates the men from the boys. There's some good news. I'll give you some good news. There is a step that separates the men from the boys. And I want to tell you something. Even though you say the prayer when you have 1 year or 2 years or 5 years, you're not done with the 6th step. Well, you may be done with the 6th step, but the 6th step ain't fucking done with you. This world ain't done with you. This disease ain't done with you. And if you're wondering, if you have me wondering, I got 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, why do I still have all these problems with my brain and my thinking? It's because you don't know anything about the 6th step. You don't know about the 6th step, but don't worry about it. You're going to find out about it. So this is what the deal is. At 10 years, I hit a second bottom. There's a lot of people that hit second bottoms. One of the things that I've seen, it's not only me, I've seen a pattern. I have seen people in here. I see them all the time, by the way, because I go to certain types of meetings where all they talk about is God. That's the only thing they talk about, because one of the ways if you want to talk about a practical thing, I'm going to talk about a practical thing now. How do you keep God, the central factor of your life, so large that worldly clamors, you can't even think about him? And the way I do it is I go to 3 meetings a day, sometimes 4 meetings a day, and the only thing we talk about in the meetings are God. They're AA meetings, but the only thing, they don't talk about drink, they don't have a drinking problem. The only thing they talk about is God. And so I don't go for like 3 hours at a time where I'm not talking about God. And I maybe listen to music about God. And you want to know, here's the good part. Good part is I like it. You'd be surprised. And so I'm always thinking about him. So here's the deal. For 10 years, I almost go down the tubes. I go up to somebody. I tell them what's happening to me. I tell them about all the steps I'm doing. I explain to him that I'm spiritual, not religious. You know what I mean? And he says, I think you need to go to Bible study. So I add on to AA. I go to my 3 meetings a day, and then once a week I go to a Bible study. And there's 40 men there. Men. Not thumb-sucking crybabies. They're 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years. Men like Al Kennedy, the guy I saw when I had 3 months, who was dying of cancer. And he was at a meeting trying to help people. I said, man, I really like that guy. This guy's like a real man. I wish I could be like him. How would he has? And my sponsor says, well, he's dying. I said, what do you mean he's dying? I said, Russell, he's got lung cancer. He's got 6 months to live, and 6 months later he was dead. I looked at that guy, Al Kennedy, and my conception of what sobriety was completely changed. I said, I want to have what that guy has. If you want, we have. You want to go to anything? I want Al Kennedy sobriety. I don't want the kind of sobriety where I'm not drinking and picking up chips and doing all that stuff. It's okay, but I want the sobriety where you don't worry about dying. I want the sobriety where you don't worry about money. I want the sobriety where they talk about where you're not concerned with, by the judge. What does it say? We will lose fear of people. I want the sobriety where I stop being scared about what people think about me. I want that kind of sobriety. You understand? Where can I get that sobriety? He says, you want that sobriety? You got to hang out with those people. You got to hang out with those people. Don't hang out with the other people that are in the parking lot smoking cigarettes, and saying that was bullshit. You got to hang out with the people that have been separated out in the fellowship of the Spirit. You got this giant thing called Alcoholics Anonymous where most people are going to drink anyway after a few years and be miserable. And then you got a small little fellowship inside of that called the Fellowship of the Spirit. I'm just talking about what I've known and what I've seen. And those people talk about a whole different, those meetings are completely different than the deal. So now when I go to meet, I either go to those meetings or I go to meetings like this and I talk about those meetings. In other words, I don't chicken shit out. You know what I mean? And I don't water down my message about the importance of God and growing in his likeness. Just because I'm talking to you guys and guys may not like me. And the reason I can do that is because I've lost fear of y'all. I don't sit around worrying about what you're going to think about me. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping you hate my guts. I just dream. Please let them leave here and be thinking about me for 2 weeks what an asshole I am. I mean, the idea that I could be driving you fucking crazy for weeks, you know what I mean? Because I won't be thinking about you. Because God's the central fact of my life. And here's what I figured, here's what happens to me. I'm not saying it's perfect. I mean, I have my days. So don't say, well, he thinks he's perfect. I'm not. Okay, here's what happens to me. The more I think about God, the less I worry about money. The more I think about God, the less I worry about what you think about me. The more I think about God, the less I worry about whether I'm fat. The less I worry about vanity stuff. The less I worry about being old. The more I think about God, the less I worry about dying. I've had cancer 3 times. I don't worry about it. My bags are packed. I'm ready to go. I'm ready. I mean, I know you find it hard to believe that I actually want to leave y'all, but I mean, you're nice people. I like you, but it's like the Lord said, how much longer must I be with this perverse, crazy generation? I mean, there's some crazy shit going on. You guys obviously haven't been watching the TV. There's some crazy shit going on down here, you know? I don't know where I'm going. I know where I'm going, actually. But wherever I'm going, it's got to be better than this place, okay? Some of you guys are going to be there, by the way. I'm looking forward to that, you know? The more I get separated out into a person who is doing exactly what the big book says, so say God making the central fact of my life. By the way, I just want to point out to you, you may have missed this. Before the steps, before everything, before the steps, before they get into everything, they say, there is one who has all power, that one is God, may you find him now. So you can do the steps till the cows come home. If you haven't found God, and he's not a central fact of your life, it ain't going to do you any good anyway. That's what the whole book is about. Haven't you read the book, Chapter Agnostic? Therefore, we wrote a book where we're going to talk, of course, we're going to talk about God. And here's where agnostics have a problem. Here's where people who don't believe in God or doubts have a problem, which is about 80% of the people in AA who get nervous when they hear crap like this. You know why they get nervous? They get uncomfortable. You know why? Because they're not believers. They're not believers. They're scared. They want sobriety. They want everything this program has to offer, but they don't want to hear about God. They want to hear about other things. You know, that's the deal. So I could be wrong about all this stuff, you know. I mean, I'm going to give you that. I mean, I'm just telling you what works for me. That's what I'm supposed to do. Every alcoholic, this is what the book says, each alcoholic in his own language and from his own point of view talks about how he developed a relationship with God. Why would they say that throughout the book, in all the books, if that wasn't the most important thing? And if that isn't the most important thing, if that is the most important thing, is that the one thing that's consistent throughout all the books, why would you get all upset about it? When the book, The Spiritual Axiom, whenever you're disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with you. Why wouldn't you want to fix that? Well, the reason you want to fix that is because you're not willing. You're not really doing the sixth step. You're not willing to give up that animosity you have towards God, towards religion, towards everybody. You're not willing. You're not willing to do the program. And that's why, you know, you'll always be like a 6-year-old. You'll have the emotions of a 6-year-old. That's why you'll always be hurting people and hurting yourself, and you won't grow up. You know, that's the reason. That's how it is. I mean, it's not really complicated. It's not rocket science. The problem is that our chief characteristic is defiance. That's what it says in 12 and 12. Just like Bill Wilson was defiant, I was defiant, we're all defiant. I was defiant for 10 years, then I got the shit slapped. I know other people that have been defiant for 30 years. I constantly hang around with people saying, I've been in the program for 23 years. I've never heard that. You know how many people I've heard say, I have some people in here that know it's true because they go to the meetings I go to. How many people I've come to the meetings to say I got 23 years, I never heard this in any meeting I've ever gone to. Ever. And it's right out of the book. It's right there. It's just not, nobody talks about it because they don't want people staring at them funny or something, whatever the hell that is, you know what I mean? So thank you very much. That's all.
Recovery Inspiration is sitting right there waiting for you. Rocketed.org AA speaker recordings brings real voices and real stories straight to your ears. Subscribe now so you never miss a new recording dropping. Keep that motivation on tap and help spread the word. Hit subscribe and let recovery find you every single day.